There was a version of Britain where certain cars simply belonged outside terraced houses, in supermarket car parks, parked nose to tail along seaside promenades every August. Nobody photographed them. Nobody thought to. Why would you photograph something as ordinary as the car next door's Cortina, or the Viva your uncle drove to the factory every morning? They were background noise, the wallpaper of British roads throughout the 1970s. And then, without any single dramatic moment, they were gone, scrapped, forgotten, quietly erased from memory. 10 of them are about to be remembered properly. The first one you will recognize instantly. Number 10. Vauxhall Viva HC. Picture a driveway in Luton or Dagenham, 1974. A boxy little saloon sits there, unremarkable, dependable, exactly what a young family needed. That was the Viva HC, and by the time production ended, well over 500,000 had rolled off Vauxhall's lines. It was never glamorous. It didn't need to be. Its overhead valve engine, initially 1159cc before growing to 1256cc, asked little and gave enough. Learner drivers cut their teeth in them. Commuters relied on them for the daily grind to factories and offices. But behind the scenes, something was shifting. General Motors was quietly merging its British and German operations, and the Viva's days were numbered long before most owners realized it. Production stopped in 1979, folded into badge changes and platform-sharing decisions made far from any British showroom. What followed was ordinary neglect rather than dramatic decline. Bodywork rusted, parts dried up, and a car once seen on every street became something younger drivers today wouldn't recognize at all. But if the Viva vanished quietly, the next car on this list disappeared for a much stranger reason entirely. Number 9. Hillman Avenger. The Avenger arrived in 1970 with something genuinely new for a British family car: a plastic front grille, 4.5 feet wide, the largest of its kind on any mass-produced car of the era. It looked modern. It sold steadily, year after year, becoming a familiar sight outside schools and along commuter routes, competing directly with the Escort and Viva. Its engines, purpose-built rather than borrowed from another model, ranged from 1248cc up through 1598cc, giving buyers real choice for real budgets. Estate versions arrived in 1972, useful for tradesmen and larger families alike. Yet the company behind it was in trouble. Roots had become Chrysler UK, and Chrysler UK was struggling badly through the decade. What happened next surprised almost nobody who worked in the industry. The company was sold to Peugeot in 1978, the Avenger name was dropped, and support for existing cars thinned rapidly. Owners found parts harder to source. Rust did the rest. A car that once felt inevitable on British roads became, within a decade, a genuine rarity. Corporate collapse claimed one car. The next disappeared for reasons far closer to home. Britain simply moved on. Number 8. Austin, Morris 1100-1300. Before the 1970s had properly begun, this was already the car Britain trusted most. The Austin and Morris 1100-1300 range had been the country's best-selling model through much of the previous decade, and that popularity carried on stubbornly into the new one. Families loved its compact size and surprisingly spacious cabin. Its front-wheel drive layout and lively A-series engine gave it genuine character compared with duller rivals from Ford and Vauxhall. It sat outside council houses and semi-detached homes alike, equally at home on the school run or a Sunday drive to the coast. But British Leyland made a decision that would haunt the company for years. Rather than refining a winning formula, they replaced it entirely with the Austin Allegro in 1973. Buyers who had trusted the 1100-1300 for a decade were handed something far less loved. Production ceased, existing cars aged without proper support, and rust attacked bodywork that had never been treated for long-term survival. A car that once outsold everything else on British roads simply stopped being replaceable. What replaced it never earned the same affection. But the next car on our list came from a completely different corner of British motoring. Number 7. Triumph 1500, 1500TC. Giovanni Michelotti's styling gave this Triumph saloon a genuinely handsome face, twin headlights and a long bonnet suggesting something grander than its modest underpinnings. Launched in 1970, the 1500 offered wood-trimmed interiors and a comfortable ride that appealed to buyers wanting a step up from ordinary family saloons without the price tag of true luxury. Its 1493cc engine, initially driving the front wheels, gave respectable performance for the era. Company car drivers appreciated the badge prestige. Families appreciated the space. In 1973, British Leyland revised it into the 1500TC, switching to rear-wheel drive and sportier intentions. But the writing was already on the wall. The car existed largely as a placeholder, a stepping stone toward Triumph's next generation of saloons. Production ended in 1976, swallowed by internal restructuring rather than any failure of the car itself. Few owners fought to preserve them afterwards. Parts became scarce, and a car built in respectable numbers slipped quietly out of circulation, remembered mainly by enthusiasts rather than the wider public. That quiet exit stands in sharp contrast to the next car's fate, replaced not once, but twice. Number 6. Triumph Toledo. Somewhere between the 1300 and the more famous Dolomite sat the Toledo, a car many British buyers chose without ever quite knowing its full backstory. Introduced in 1970, it shared its basic bodyshell with grander Triumph siblings but offered rear-wheel drive and a simpler specification at a more accessible price. That made it genuinely popular with buyers wanting Triumph badge appeal without the premium cost. Its 1296cc engine kept running cost-sensible for families and first-time company car drivers alike. You'd have seen them outside suburban semis, parked at railway stations for the daily commute, ferrying children to school on wet British mornings. But British Leyland's model range during this period was a tangle of overlapping, similar cars competing against each other almost as much as against outside rivals. The Toledo was eventually absorbed into the Dolomite range entirely, discontinued as badge engineering consolidated Triumph's confusing lineup. Once production stopped, spares dried up quickly, shared as they were across several related models. Survivors became genuinely scarce, overshadowed even in memory by their more glamorous stablemates. The next car faced no such identity crisis. Everyone, without exception, knew exactly what it was. Number 5. Ford Consul Granada Mark I. Few cars said company representative quite as clearly as the Consul and Granada when they launched together in 1972. Ford designed them as genuinely European offerings, smart and well-proportioned, aimed squarely at buyers moving up from ordinary saloons into something with real presence. You'd see them gliding along motorways between sales calls, parked outside regional offices, occasionally repainted white and blue as police patrol cars on Britain's growing network of dual carriageways. Taxi firms valued their spacious cabins and dependable mechanicals. Families on modest budgets, the Consul; those wanting genuine status, the Granada. Engines ranged widely, giving buyers real flexibility depending on need and budget. For several years, this felt like the default choice for anyone wanting something substantial. Yet as the decade wore on, newer executive rivals arrived with sharper handling and fresher styling. Rust proved a persistent enemy, as it did for most British Leyland and Ford products of the era. Company fleets moved on to replacement models, and private buyers followed. What had felt inevitable on Britain's roads slowly became something you had to go looking for. If the Granada represented ambition, the next car represented something far more mainstream and far more common. Number 4. Vauxhall Magnum. Born from the Viva HC's more powerful variants, the Magnum arrived in 1973 wearing a badge designed to signal something sportier without the higher price of genuine performance cars. Its 1759cc and 2279cc engines gave real pace compared with humbler Viva stablemates, and 7-dial instrument packs replaced the basic strip speedometer, giving the cabin a noticeably upmarket feel. Young professionals liked it. Company car drivers who wanted a little flair without breaking policy budgets liked it too. You'd catch one parked outside a suburban pub on a Friday evening, or overtaking confidently on a dual carriageway during a family holiday drive. Built at Ellesmere Port through the mid-1970s, it briefly carved out genuine popularity within Vauxhall's range. But its lifespan was short by design, tied directly to the platform changes reshaping Vauxhall's entire lineup as GM pushed European standardization. Production ended in 1978, and the name itself simply disappeared, absorbed into newer model ranges. Owners rarely fought to keep them running once parts support faded, and rust claimed most of what remained within a decade. The next entry lasted longer on Britain's roads, but its ending proved just as final. Number 3. Austin Maxi. Britain's first true 5-door family hatchback arrived in 1969, but it was the facelift version from 1971 that finally found its footing on ordinary roads. A new grille, a wood-finished dashboard, and a choice of 1500cc or 1750cc engines gave the Maxi genuine appeal for growing families. Its flexible seating, foldable almost flat for camping trips or house moves, made it a practical choice that owners genuinely valued. Sales settled into a steady rhythm through the decade, 20 to 30,000 a year, enough to make it a familiar sight outside schools and supermarkets. But British Leyland's attention drifted elsewhere. The Marina absorbed marketing focus and investment, leaving the Maxi to quietly soldier on largely unchanged for years. Corrosion attacked its wings and rear quarter panels aggressively, with replacement panels notoriously hard to source even at the time. Production limped to a close in 1981, and once support faded, so did the cars. A once common practical hatchback became, within a generation, something most people had simply forgotten existed. Britain forgot this one quickly. The next car, by contrast, took considerably longer to fade away. Number 2. Rover P6. For much of the 1970s, the Rover P6 represented genuine achievement, a car parked outside detached houses and company headquarters alike, signaling that its owner had done rather well for themselves. Bank managers drove them. Regional directors drove them. Engine choices ranged from a smooth 4-cylinder unit to a genuinely potent V8, giving buyers real choice between economy and outright performance. Its safety-conscious engineering, including a rigid passenger cell, felt genuinely advanced for its era. You'd see them gliding along motorways on business trips, parked outside golf clubs, occasionally used for wedding duties by families wanting something with real presence. But by 1976, its replacement, the Rover SD1, arrived promising modern styling and fresh engineering, and company fleets shifted allegiance quickly. Existing P6s aged out of favor, treated as yesterday's executive choice rather than anything worth preserving. Rust, as ever, proved merciless, particularly around the sills and wheel arches. Within a decade of the SD1's arrival, P6s that had once symbolized solid British success became distinctly uncommon, remembered mostly by those who once aspired to own one. Which brings us to the car that, more than any other, defined an entire decade of ordinary British life. Number 1. Ford Cortina Mark III and Mark IV. If any single car captured Britain during the 1970s, it was this one. Launched in 1970, the Mark III Cortina became the best-selling car of the entire decade, and its mark for successor continued that dominance through to 1979. It sat outside virtually every street in Britain at some point, driven by company representatives, young families, tradesmen, and first-time buyers alike. Engines ranged from a modest 1.3-litre right up to a genuinely brisk 2.0-litre, giving Ford something for every budget and every driveway. It carried families to seaside holidays, sat patiently outside primary schools during pickup time, and formed the backbone of countless company car fleets across the country. Yet its very ordinariness became its undoing. Nobody thought to preserve a car this common. As newer, safer, more efficient rivals arrived through the 1980s, Cortinas were simply scrapped in their hundreds of thousands, considered disposable rather than worth saving. Rust finished what neglect started. A car that once seemed genuinely impossible to avoid on British roads became, within a generation, something you'd struggle to find at all. None of these cars failed, not really. They were ordinary vehicles doing exactly what ordinary British families needed, carrying children to school, workers to factories, and couples on modest seaside holidays. They disappeared not through dramatic collapse but through simple neglect, because nobody thought a Cortina or a Viva was worth keeping when newer, safer, cleaner cars arrived. Britain changed. The roads changed. And somewhere along the way, cars that once filled every street quietly became memories instead. Which one did your family own? Tell us below, and if you'd like more of Britain's forgotten motoring history, stay close to Britain Rewind. Until next time.